We get Gerrit Cole tonight in Daily Fantasy Baseball, but it's not like the regular full Cole because, as you probably know, he left his last start due to a hamstring injury after about 70 pitches. So it sounds like he is in line to start for today. The question is, will he be at full health? Because if he's not, he's 11-4, and that's kind of tough to swallow on a slate where I do want to use a lot of high-salary batters. There's always a chance of re-injury, stuff like that. So there's some definite risk here on this slate. The problem is we're not going to know the answers before lock at 7:05 for tonight. So we have to decide how much risk are we willing to swallow? Should we still go Cole? Should we go elsewhere? And how do we decide to tackle this slate overall? So let's dive on in and get you set for Tuesday night. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network in numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Tuesday's 12-game main slate with lock set for 7:05 for tonight. There is just one weather note for this slate. There is a chance of rain in Kansas City for the A's and the Royals. Looks like it'll roll in sometime after first pitch and could stick around all night. So that one might be kind of dicey. We'll check back on that, on the timeline of that later on today and let you know how that thing looks. But as of right now, a little bit cautious, a little bit wary of that Royals-A's game out in Kansas City. We'll talk about pitchers in just 1 second. But first, hey, football fans, the NFL is finally back, and FanDuel is giving you a free way to get in on the action. The FanDuel NFL High-Low is a free-to-play fantasy football contest. All you have to do is build your scorecard with the teams you think will score highest or lowest in 4 stat categories. The closer you are to being spot on, the more points you'll get. Players with the most points each week split the prize pool, and a perfect scorecard will win the jackpot. Head over to FanDuel.com today and play the FanDuel High-Low for free. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Speaking of football, we got a stream coming up later on today. JJ Zacharias and I breaking down the top waiver ads heading into week number 2. That'll be on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. We've had that show going for past couple of years now. It's been a lot of fun. It's coming back today, 4 p.m., YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. The FanDuel channel is there. After that, we will have our MLB DFS Q&A at 4:30. The MLB Q&A is at 4:30, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Friday, it's at 4 on Wednesday because there's no NFL show for that day. So make sure you subscribe to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages to get those as we go live and get your questions in. Also, a quick reminder, our Week 1 NFL DFS recap podcast is already posted, breaking down the big takeaways from week number 1, usages, injuries, how we're viewing guys going forward and stuff like that via myself and Brandon Gadula. A lot of big takeaways, a lot of second-tier running backs on the ascent, and plenty to discuss there. So find that by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review as well. Pitching preview for this Tuesday main slate. Gerrit Cole checks in as the highest salary pitcher on FanDuel, 11-4. And again, we'll talk about him in a second. Nathan Eovaldi is 10,000, highest among the non-Cole pitchers. Lucas Giolito, also coming off an injury, is $9,800. Jose Barrios is $9,400. Frankie Montas in that potential rain game is $93. We have Marcus Stroman and Zach Greinke at $9,000. And then Kyle Gibson and Touki Toussaint are the others at $8,000 or higher. On this slate, I think that the question is, how highly do you view the non-Cole options? Because if you think you've got good alternatives, you can afford to not put Cole first and give yourself some flexibility in case that hamstring does wind up limiting him, whether it be from an effectiveness perspective or a pitch count perspective. And I do think there is a good enough alternative on this slate to not put Cole number 1. That guy is Nathan Eovaldi. He is my top pitcher for tonight's slate. We talked about a couple times recently, but Eovaldi he's dealing right now. He has increased his curveball usage, and it's working out tremendously for him. Eovaldi's been throwing that pitch a lot over his past 9 starts, and in those starts, he has a 3.27 skill interactive ERA. That is the second best mark on this slate behind Gerrit Cole. His 29% strikeout rate ranks 3rd behind Gerrit Cole and Frankie Montas. He has a low walk rate. Eovaldi is still not the best in terms of the batted ball data because he is letting up too many fly balls, but it hasn't hurt him too much, though. He's averaging about a homer allowed per game, and, you know, we can live with that for sure. He faced the Rays last time out, and Eovaldi held them scoreless for 7 innings. He had 8 strikeouts and allowed just 3 hits. He also had a 10 strikeout game earlier in this stretch. And that's despite the fact that Eovaldi hasn't had many soft matchups. And I wouldn't classify tonight's matchup with the Mariners as being soft. They're they have won some games this year for sure. They're not a soft matchup, but they will strike out. They have a 25% strikeout rate versus righties with a 90 WRC plus and a 157 ISO. We can work with the pitcher in that matchup. And the park might help keep the batted balls in the yard, though it's not the most pitcher-friendly park. And again, things are pretty even this time of year given the lower temperatures out east. So we're not getting as big of a park factor advantage by using pitchers out west as we get earlier on in the year. Just it's better than Boston, though. So I think that's a good thing for Eovaldi. So he's not perfect, but Eovaldi is healthy. He gives us salary savings at $10,000. That's enough for me to put him above Gerrit Cole for tonight. So for me, I am going to make Nathan Eovaldi my highest exposed pitcher for today, put him number 1, and then go from there. I will put Gerrit Cole number 2. I think that after considering the risk, considering the alternatives, he does deserve to be second on our list. And there are some guys who can save his salary in stacks in terms of getting up to Cole's salary at 11.4. So we can make this work without totally glossing over the good hitters who are on tonight's slate. Just know that there are paths to failure here. If you are extremely risk averse, I wouldn't use Cole. The pitch count is one of the bigger concerns. I should say is not the big concern for Cole because he went 70 in the start he left due to injury. That was 7 days ago. So it's not like he's no longer stretched out. Just kind of the health. The reason I'm willing to gamble on that health now is how good he has been recently. Cole's been using more sliders over his past 7 starts. And in that time, he has a 36% strikeout rate with a 6% walk rate. His hard hit rate allowed is 33%. So if we're looking at just the best overall pitcher on this slate, I would say that's Gerrit Cole by a good margin. And his matchup here is solid. The Orioles have good hitters, but they will strike out, similar to the Mariners, and they also don't walk a ton. That can help Cole get over the top and be the highest scoring pitcher of the night without being, 129 pitch Gerrit Cole. It is just a risk given we don't know the hamstring's health. The Yankees are fighting for a playoff spot, so they have incentive to push him out there, even if he's not 100%. He's $11,400, which is pretty restrictive. And when you add it all together, I've got enough here where I will push Cole below Eovaldi, and I will lower my exposure overall. Like usually on a slate like this, like Cole's probably going to be like a 60% exposure type guy. I'm comfortable going like 40 Eovaldi, 30 Cole, and then spending the other 30 elsewhere. I think that's probably the right way to play things. A little bit more spread out, but I think that with the way things grade out for tonight, that's probably the right way to play things, just because there are more question marks at pitcher than we usually have. So Gerrit Cole to me, not number 1, but still someone I want to use for today. The value play for tonight is right at $9,000 as opposed to below it, because I think we're going to need points to hang on this slate. So I'm going to go with Marcus Stroman as the quote-unquote value at $9,000. And Stroman isn't typically great for DFS because he doesn't get enough strikeouts. But he's getting more strikeouts recently, which allows us to appreciate how good of a real-world pitcher he is. That's kind of the shame of DFS. I love DFS, but it does make us underappreciate guys like Stroman, like Adam Wainwright, Zach Greinke in the past, stuff like that. It is kind of a bummer. Kyle Hendricks as well. But I think with Stroman, I think he's doing enough recently where we can use him in DFS as well. He's been cutting back on his sinkers over his past 6 starts. And as you know, sinkers are bad for DFS. They're generally low strikeout pitches. So lowering the usage there is a good thing for Stroman. And it's working out. His strikeout rate is up to 26% over that 7-start sample. He had 9 strikeouts in 1 start, 8 in another, and 7 in his most recent outing. 4 of those, it was 6 starts, not 7. 4 of those 6 starts were on the road for Stroman as well. He's gotten those strikeouts without sacrificing his batted ball data, because sometimes we'll see guys increase the strikeout rate, but the losses elsewhere negate that. But Stroman still has a 28% fly ball rate allowed in this time. That's a very good number. So if he can get you 9 strikeouts while still being the good real-world pitcher that Marcus Stroman is, that's fully in play for DFS. He's facing the Cardinals tonight. I stacked them last night. So I obviously there are some guys in this offense I respect, but they're not as big of a force against righties as lefties. Their WRC plus versus righties goes down to 90. They have a 151 ISO. I think we can use a pitcher against that. Stroman does get to 40 FanDuel points pretty consistently, but that doesn't matter. I don't want 40. I don't want a floor. I want a ceiling. But I do think that Stroman can get there. He had 55 not that long ago. I think he has upside, especially with his strikeouts being on the rise. So I'll put him number 3 for tonight. But I do think he needs to be behind Eovaldi and Cole due to upside. We'll also run through one more guy in things to watch. So it's Eovaldi 1, Cole 2, Stroman 3. We'll talk about Frankie Montas in things to watch. Before that, though, let's talk about stacks. And the stacks are amazing tonight. Like, my goodness, there are good stacks on this slate. I think the most fun one is the Yankees. They're facing Alexander Wells. Wells has the exact profile we want to stack against. He has had 5 longer outings with the Orioles so far. In those outings, he has a 4.99 skill interactive ERA with an 18% strikeout rate. He has let up a 54% hard hit rate and a 40% fly ball rate. You could not build a better stacking profile for us, except for maybe a slightly lower strikeout rate. The results have reflected that. His ERA is 8.00. It is a 5-outing sample with just 18 innings, but we saw this in AAA as well, because there, Wells had a low strikeout rate, let up a lot of fly balls, and it's starting to bite him now that he's facing big league hitters. Pretty sure Giancarlo Stanton counts as being a big league hitter. That could be an issue for tonight. I think that we can load up on the Yankees here. Feel very good about them. I think that they are the number 1 stack. And although we have a lot of good stack for tonight, I feel very confident in saying the Yankees are the number 1 option for today. The one downside of the Yankees is that the salaries here are pretty restrictive. If you want to get access to this team, you're going to have to try to find some guys, maybe lower in the order, who have a path to upside. Joey Gallo, $3,000. He is striking out a ton, and it's really, really annoying. But again, Wells is a lower strikeout guy. I don't think he's someone who's probably going to overpower a bunch of lefties. So I do think that Gallo, despite things being really, really rough with the Yankees, is still someone we want to turn to for tonight. Gary Sanchez, Kyle Higashioka, whoever catches for the Yankees tonight, both those guys could be in play as well. So we have to be okay making some consolations, going at guys who may not be in the best form right now, specifically with Gallo. But I think with Gallo, given the power he's shown, lefty on lefty, it's still there, just needs to make contact. And I think he could for tonight. So Gallo, worth taking that risk at $3,000 and seeing if he can actually run into one and put it in the seats. Another route to taking some salary outside of Gallo, Sanchez, Higashioka is by stacking the Phillies. Obviously, Bryce Harper excluded there, but the rest of the guys in the stack we want to use, all super low salaried. They're facing Adrian Sampson. Sampson hasn't been bad this year from a results perspective, but there are some red flags in his profile. He's had 6 outings in the majors. His ERA is 2.20, which is very good. Good for him. I just don't expect that to stick around. Sampson has a lot of the elements that we want to stack against. He has a 19% strikeout rate. That number was 17% in AAA. He has let up a 46% hard hit rate, and that's likely why his ERA in AAA was 4.96. Plus, Sampson doesn't walk guys, which means he lets up more balls in play. And it hasn't bit him yet. He did let up a couple of homers to the Reds last week, but the underlying data says it's probably going to bite him eventually. His expected ERA at Baseball Savant is 5.72. That's while being mostly a longer reliever, and now he's being asked to be a starter, be stretched out, pitch longer in games, lose some velocity. I don't think that transition will go super well. The Phillies offense isn't deep, I wouldn't say. I think they've got a lot of issues right now, given all their injuries, but they still got some guys who can hit. And not all of them are high salaried, which makes them really fun for tonight. Specifically, there is a 3-player stack we go with on the Phillies that can really move the needle in terms of salary. Those guys are Odubel Herrera, Brad Miller, and Didi Gregorius. All 3 guys should hit in the top 6 spots in the lineup. They all have an ISO of at least 176 versus righties. None of them are big strikeout guys, and they're all $2,500 or lower. So you can get Cole with Harper and stack the Phillies and it not be that terrible. You're not going to get Harper plus an Astro stack or Harper plus a Yankee stack. But if you want to move the needle a lot, Gregorius, Miller, Herrera are the guys you want to turn to, and they are going to be a staple for me tonight. Even in the Eovaldi lineups and the Stroman lineups, I'm still going to stack the Phillies because it's going to give me a lot more flexibility to spend up with my second stack. Finally, the third stacker is one I alluded to before, the Astros facing Jordan Lyles tonight. And it seems like Lyles is kind of like the sacrificial lamb for the Rangers. He's not pitching well, but he's going deep in games, and they're just kind of having him eat innings. But either way, we can easily stack against him here. Lyles had a curveball he was using earlier on this year that was jacking up his ground ball rate. For whatever reason, he's gone away from that pitch. He's up to 11 starts with the curveball usage going back down, and his ERA is 6.06. He's let up 5+ runs in 5 of 11 outings, and the peripherals are pretty rough too. He's letting up a 45% hard hit rate and a 42% fly ball rate. His strikeout rate is 18%, and you're putting those numbers up against the Astros, which is not likely to end super well. They have a 113 WRC plus versus righties. They are fully healthy once again, so I think we should be high on the Astros here. And against Lyles, we can view righties and lefties as being similarly favorable because lefties do have a higher fly ball rate, but Lyles doesn't keep either side on the ground. He also tends to let up more hard contact to righties, which is good for Alex Bregman. Bregman starting to heat up. He had a home run last night, but I think that was pretty predictable, not just the one-off, because he has a 49% hard hit rate since he returned from the IL compared to a 40% rate for the full year. Strikeout rate is 7% since he returned. So Alex Bregman pre-injury was a pretty low-power guy, and all of a sudden, he's turning it on. So I'll be high on Bregman here for sure. I know the salary is very high, but I think it's worth it. We can help offset that if Jose Siri starts once again. Not positive that'll happen, given how hesitant they were to start Siri once they initially called him up. But if he does play, we should use him. He was awesome last night. Minimum salary. If he's in there, let's go. Chaz McCormick also still someone I'm willing to turn to in terms of value plays on the Astros as well. Let's finish up here with things to watch. I mentioned Frankie Montas before. He is the one other pitcher I'm considering for today. He's facing the Royals, who are not a high strikeout team, and Montas is on the road. That's why he's fourth. But he can get strikeouts. He has a 30% strikeout rate in 12 starts with more splitters. That's the second highest mark on the slate behind Cole. He's $9,300, so I kind of think that it's a night where I'm okay spreading out my exposure to pitcher more than I usually do. Putting Montas in there, putting Stroman, Cole, Eovaldi, having exposure to all four and seeing what happens. That's not how I try to keep things at 3 usually, but I do think for tonight, 4 is fully in play. Montas will be fourth. Again, check the weather for that game because it's not just Montas, but also I do want to stack the A's. They're facing Jackson Kowar. They, I think, are a team that could do well against him because Kowar, the strikeouts he got in AAA are starting to follow him now. He has a 26% clip in the majors. And that's why the A's were not in the top 3, but he's still letting up a lot of fly balls and a lot of hard contact. And we know the A's, specifically Matt Olson, can bring that sauce for sure. It's not the best park for offense, but it's still an upgrade over Oakland for sure. So I think they're a good second tier stack that may fly a bit under the radar relative to the others, especially with the Yankees and the Astros being super popular for stacking in general. I think that could help with the A's here. So if we get the all clear on the weather, check out Montas at pitcher, check out the A's for stacking, and feel good about both those options. I am uncertain about how I want to view Jesus Luzardo for tonight. He's gotten a lot more strikeouts recently, and I still believe in Luzardo's talent, despite how rough things have been this entire year. Luzardo's had 8 strikeouts in 2 of the past 3 starts, but his approach hasn't changed that much in that time, which means I'm not sure if it'll stick. He's had the same approach for about 6 or 7 starts now, and the early part of that window was pretty rough. So I'm a bit nervous about how well Luzardo has pitched recently, which means that I can't get too high on the Nationals, but I do still think that it's worthwhile to get some Nationals exposure in case we see early August or pre-trade Luzardo come back up, which I think is very, very possible. It could happen. So I'll have some Nats here. Just not going to go too crazy due to what Luzardo has shown the past couple of starts. Home run calls for tonight. I had a hard time choosing the boring one because, we've got the Yankees, got the Astros. I think Matt Olson's a good one for a boring home run call as well. I'm going to wind up going Giancarlo Stanton just because we get him against a low strikeout pitcher who lets up a lot of fly balls and a lot of hard contact. Really hard for me to say no to that. So the boring one will be Giancarlo Stanton, but there were a lot of good contenders there. Matt Olson is someone I would check out if you're looking for a home run bet. I think that Matt Olson probably grades out pretty well there. The fun one, going back to the Phillies, Didi Gregorius hits a lot of fly balls facing Sampson, who should let up a lot of balls in play. Gregorius, low salary. Same with Miller. Same with Herrera. But I think that Didi, a good bet to go yard for tonight. So the home run calls for this Tuesday slate are going to be Giancarlo Stanton and Didi Gregorius. But again, Matt Olson also in that boring discussion for me as well. That is all that we have here for today on the Solo Shot. But again, more baseball talk coming up later on. We have the MLB Q&A, that is at 4:30. We have the waiver wire Q&A with myself and JJ Zachariason at 4 on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Go subscribe there. Come back and forth with your questions in hand as well. PGA podcast this week. Brandon Gadula is flying solo. That podcast either up now or should be up pretty soon, previewing this week's PGA event. I will be back on that after baseball is over. A little busy right now. So Brandon's flying solo. I think he's doing for the Ryder Cup next week too, depending if they have contests for that. So check that out on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Week 1 recap podcast posted. NASCAR and UFC later on this week as well. So a lot of good stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. If you've got more questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you tonight. Go win some cash. We'll talk to you once again on Wednesday. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.